You are unacceptable. 3 words. That's all it took to destroy Clara Whitmore's world. Standing in her finest borrowed dress before Red Hollow's wealthiest family, she watched Victor Hale's cold eyes sweep over her body like she was livestock at auction. The room fell silent. Her mother's hand trembled in hers. Her father's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. 6 months, Victor. 6 months, Victor said, addressing her parents as if she wasn't even there. Make her worthy, or the deal is finished. This is her story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Now, let's begin. The parlor of the Hale estate smelled like money, imported tobacco, polished mahogany, and something else Clara couldn't name. Entitlement, maybe. The kind that seeped into wallpaper and settled into the bones of a house built on other people's suffering. She stood in the center of the room, hands folded at her waist, trying not to let them shake. The dress they'd put her in wasn't hers. Nothing about this day was hers. It belonged to her parents, to the creditors circling their failing general store like vultures, to the whispered desperation that had filled their home for months. Turn around. Victor Hale's voice carried the lazy confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Clara obeyed, her movements stiff, mechanical. She felt his eyes on her back, her shoulders, the curve of her hips beneath the borrowed blue fabric. Felt his judgment like fingers pressing bruises into her skin. When she completed the turn, his expression hadn't changed, bored, mildly interested, the way someone might look at a horse they were considering purchasing. How old is she? Victor asked, directing the question to Clara's father. 23, sir. Thomas Whitmore's voice had lost all its fight. Once, he'd been proud. Once, he'd stood tall behind the counter of his store, joking with customers, extending credit to families who needed it. That man was gone. The one standing here now was hollow, scraped clean by debt and desperation. Education? She reads well, writes a fine hand, keeps our accounts. I didn't ask about her accomplishments. Victor's interruption was casual, almost friendly. I asked about her education. Can she manage a household? Does she know music? French? Clara's mother stepped forward, her voice too bright. She's an exceptional baker, Mr. Hale. Her bread is Mrs. Whitmore. Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I have bakers. I have cooks and maids and launders. What I need is a wife who can stand beside me without causing embarrassment. The words landed like stones in still water. Clara watched the ripples of understanding cross her mother's face. She's a good girl, Margaret Whitmore said quietly. Obedient, kind. She'd make a fine. She's fat. 2 words. Clara felt them like a slap. The room inhaled. Her mother's mouth opened, closed. Her father's face went red, then white. But neither of them defended her. Neither of them said a single word. Victor rose from his chair, a tall man with the kind of build that came from leisure, riding for pleasure, fencing with instructors, swimming in private pools. He approached Clara with the measured steps of someone conducting an inspection. I won't sugarcoat this, he said, stopping just close enough to make her skin crawl. My family has standards. My mother has standards. Society has standards. You understand? Clara's throat was so tight she could barely force out the word. Yes, good. He circled her slowly. You have potential. Your face is pleasant enough. Your features are acceptable. But your figure, he gestured vaguely, as if the specifics were too distasteful to articulate. It's simply not what we require. Mr. Hale, her father's voice cracked. Please, we can... 6 months. Victor returned to his chair, settling into it like a king on a throne. That's what I'm offering, 6 months to make her presentable. If she can transform herself into something worthy of the Hale name, we'll proceed with the arrangement. If not, he shrugged. Well, I'm sure you understand the consequences. Her father understood. The whole town understood. The Whitmores owed money to half of Red Hollow, money they'd borrowed to keep the store running through 2 failed harvests, through the influenza outbreak that killed 1/3 of their customers, through her brother's medical bills before he died anyway. The Hale family owned the bank. The bank owned the Whitmores. This wasn't a proposal. It was a transaction. She'll do it, Thomas said quickly. Whatever it takes, she'll... I'm not asking her. Victor's gaze stayed fixed on Clara's father. I'm asking you. Can you deliver what I require? The silence stretched like taffy, hot and sticky and suffocating. Yes, her father whispered. Yes, we can. Excellent. Victor stood, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. I'll expect monthly reports on her progress. My mother will provide a list of acceptable measurements. You have until October 15th. He walked past Clara without another glance, pausing only to address her parents one final time. Don't disappoint me. My generosity has limits. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Clara stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to dissolve into the expensive carpet and disappear forever. Instead, she turned to her parents. Her mother was crying silently, tears streaming down her worn face. Her father stared at the floor, jaw working, hands clenched at his sides. Papa? Clara's voice came out small, childlike. What did you just agree to? He didn't look at her. What I had to. The ride home was silent, except for the wagon wheels crunching over dirt roads. Clara sat between her parents, the borrowed dress feeling tighter with every breath, crushing her ribs, squeezing the air from her lungs. They'd sold her. That's what this was. A transaction dressed up in wedding veils and false promises. When they reached the small house behind the general store, her mother finally spoke. You'll need to start tomorrow. Clara looked at her. Start what? The treatment. Mrs. Hale sent a list. Margaret pulled a folded paper from her handbag, hands trembling. Dietary restrictions, exercise regimens, recommended remedies. The word remedies tasted like poison in Clara's mouth. Mama, I don't want... What you want doesn't matter anymore. Her mother's voice broke. Don't you understand? If you don't do this, we lose everything. The store, this house. Your father goes to debtor's prison. I'll be... She couldn't finish the sentence. Clara knew how it ended. Destitute women in Red Hollow had few options. The workhouse, the brothels on the edge of town, the slow starvation that came from having nothing and no one. It's just 6 months, her father said, finally meeting her eyes. 6 months of discipline, and then you'll be comfortable forever, safe, provided for. By a man who thinks I'm disgusting. By a man who can give you everything. Thomas's voice hardened. Do you know what that's worth? Do you have any idea what most women would sacrifice for that security? Clara wanted to say that most women wouldn't have to shrink themselves into nothing to earn it, that most women were allowed to exist without constantly apologizing for taking up space. But she looked at her parents, really looked at them, and saw the truth written in every line of their faces. They were drowning, and she was the only rope they had left. What do I have to do? She asked quietly. Her mother unfolded the paper, her voice flat as she read. No bread, no butter, no potatoes, rice, or sugar. 1 small meal per day, primarily vegetables and lean meat. 2 hours of walking, minimum. And, she hesitated, and what? Mrs. Hale recommends a tonic, arsenic-based. It suppresses appetite and promotes weight reduction. Clara's blood went cold. That's poison. In large doses, yes, but in small, controlled amounts... Her mother's voice trailed off. Even she couldn't make it sound safe. I won't do it. You will. Her father's tone left no room for argument. You'll do exactly what that list says, and you'll do it with gratitude. We didn't raise you to be selfish. Selfish. The word hit her like a fist. I didn't ask for this, Clara said, her voice rising. I didn't ask to be paraded in front of that man like livestock. I didn't ask to have my body discussed like it's public property. Enough. Thomas stood, his chair scraping against the floor. You think this is about you? You think we're enjoying this? We're trying to save this family, Clara. If that means sacrificing your pride for 6 months, then that's what you'll do. He walked out, leaving her alone with her mother. Margaret sat motionless, the list still clutched in her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I know it's not fair. Clara laughed, the sound bitter and broken. Fair? Mama, he called me fat to my face. He talked about me like I wasn't even in the room. And you said nothing. Papa said nothing. You just stood there and let him. What were we supposed to do? Her mother's head snapped up, eyes blazing. Challenge him? Defend your honor? And then what? Watch while he walks away and leaves us with nothing? At least we'd still have our dignity. Dignity doesn't pay debts. Margaret slammed her hand on the table. Dignity doesn't put food on this table or keep the roof over our heads. You're young, Clara. You don't understand what it's like to watch everything you've built crumble. To know that one wrong word, one moment of pride could destroy your entire world. Clara stared at her mother, seeing a stranger. When had she become this person? When had fear replaced every other emotion? You're asking me to starve myself, Clara said slowly, to poison myself, to hate my own body until it fits someone else's vision of acceptable. And you're calling that survival? I'm calling it reality. Margaret stood, folding the list with precise, angry movements. You start tomorrow. I'll prepare your meals. You'll follow the schedule. And in 6 months, you'll marry Victor Hale and never have to worry about money again. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the frame. I know you think I'm cruel, that I don't love you, but everything I'm doing is because I do. Her voice cracked. Someday, when you have children of your own, you'll understand. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice. Sometimes it looks like forcing someone to do what's necessary, even when they hate you for it. She left Clara alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of meals she'd never eat again. The first week was hell. Clara's stomach cramped constantly, a gnawing emptiness that nothing could fill. The single meal her mother prepared each day, boiled vegetables, a sliver of unseasoned chicken, disappeared in minutes, leaving her hollow and aching. The walking was worse. 2 hours every morning pacing the dusty roads around Red Hollow while the sun beat down like hammer blows. Her feet blistered, her legs screamed, but her mother followed behind in the wagon, timing her, making sure she didn't stop. The whole town watched. Mrs. Henderson from the millinery whispered to Mrs. Chen from the laundry. Mr. Blackwell, who ran the saloon, made jokes loud enough for Clara to hear as she passed. Even the children stared, pointing and giggling until their parents shushed them. Everyone knew. Everyone watched. Everyone had an opinion. Poor thing, they said. Desperate times, they said. Well, she does need to lose weight, they said. Clara stopped looking at people, stopped listening. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on counting steps, on anything except the burning shame that threatened to consume her. At night, alone in her room, she cried into her pillow. Her body hurt everywhere. Muscles she didn't know existed announced themselves with every movement, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the other kind. The kind that came from hearing her own father say she wasn't good enough. The kind that came from watching her mother measure out vegetables like they were gold, rationing food with the precision of a miser. The kind that came from knowing an entire town was invested in her transformation, in watching her shrink and reshape and become acceptable. On the 8th day, her mother brought the tonic. It came in a small brown bottle, the liquid inside pale and cloudy. No label, no instructions, just a cork stopper and her mother's tight smile. Mrs. Hale says 3 drops twice a day, in water. Clara held the bottle, feeling its weight. Have you researched this? Do you know what it actually contains? I know it works. Mrs. Hale showed me photographs. Women who used it lost significant weight. Did they also lose their health, their hair, their teeth? Her mother's jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. I'm being cautious. Mama, this is arsenic. It's literally poison. In large doses, these are small, controlled. There's no such thing as a controlled dose of poison, Clara's voice rose. You're asking me to slowly kill myself because a rich woman says it's fashionable. I'm asking you to do what's necessary. Margaret's voice went cold. Take the drops, Clara. Don't make this harder than it has to be. They stared at each other across the kitchen table. Clara saw no give in her mother's eyes, no compassion, just tired determination and the weight of bills they couldn't pay. She took the drops. The first dose burned going down, leaving a metallic taste in her mouth that lingered for hours. By evening, her stomach churned. By midnight, she was vomiting into a basin, her body rejecting the poison even as her mother insisted it was normal, that the symptoms would pass. They didn't pass. They just became familiar. By the end of the first month, Clara had lost 15 pounds. The town celebrated it like a victory. Women stopped her on the street to congratulate her mother. The general store saw an uptick in business. Apparently, successfully remaking your daughter into an acceptable product was good for trade. Victor's mother sent a note. Satisfactory progress, continue. Clara read it and felt nothing. She'd moved past anger, past shame, into a kind of numb acceptance. This was her life now. Starvation, poison, the constant ache of a body pushed beyond its limits. She stopped sleeping well. The hunger made rest impossible. She'd drift off only to wake an hour later, stomach cramping, head pounding. The arsenic brought vivid nightmares. Visions of suffocating, of drowning, of being buried alive while people stood above ground discussing her measurements. Her skin grew dry and papery. Her hair, once thick and shining, began falling out in clumps. She found strands on her pillow, in her brush, caught in the fabric of her dresses. Her dresses. They hung looser now, fabric pooling where it used to pull tight. Her mother took them in with needle and thread, adjusting them weakly as Clara's body shrank. "You're doing so well," Margaret said, measuring her waist with a fabric tape. "Another inch lost. Victor will be pleased." Clara didn't respond. She'd stopped having opinions about Victor, about the wedding, about any of it. She existed in a fog, moving through days like a ghost, present but not quite alive. The bakery, her bakery, the small operation she ran in the back of the general store, sat abandoned, the ovens cold, the flour untouched. Her mother had forbidden her from baking. "You can't be around food," Margaret explained. "The temptation is too great." So Clara's joy, her one source of pride and creativity, was locked away. Another sacrifice on the altar of acceptability. Month 2 brought visitors. Mrs. Hale herself arrived in a gleaming black carriage, stepping down in a rustle of silk and superiority. She looked Clara over like a jeweler examining a stone, turning her chin this way and that, checking her teeth, her fingernails, the clarity of her eyes. "Adequate," she declared, "though I expected more progress by now." Clara's mother apologized, promised to increase the restrictions. Mrs. Hale nodded, satisfied, and left a new list of requirements. No salt, no tea, 1 meal every other day. "That's not sustainable," Clara said weakly. "I'll collapse." "Then rest more." Her mother's voice was mechanical, worn smooth by repetition. "Conserve your strength." The walking continued. 2 hours became 3. Clara's legs trembled constantly now, muscles eating themselves for fuel. She stumbled often, catching herself on fence posts, on walls, on anything solid. People watched with a mixture of concern and fascination. This was entertainment, after all. A real-life transformation, better than any story in the penny dreadfuls they read in secret. Would she make it? Would she become worthy? Would Victor Hale finally accept her? The whole town waited for the answer. By month 3, Clara stopped menstruating. Her body, starved and poisoned, shut down everything not essential to survival. Her mother consulted Mrs. Hale, who assured them this was normal, even desirable. "It means the treatment is working," Margaret said, though she wouldn't meet Clara's eyes when she said it. Clara stood in front of her bedroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, collarbones jutting like knife blades. Her arms were twigs, her legs barely strong enough to support her weight. She looked sick. She looked dying. The town called it beautiful. "Such dedication," they whispered. "Such discipline," they marveled. "She's really transforming," they agreed. Clara wanted to scream at them, wanted to grab their shoulders and shake them until they saw what was really happening, but she didn't have the strength, could barely stand long enough to dress herself, let alone stage a rebellion. Her father avoided her now, couldn't look at what he'd done, what he continued to allow. He spent his days at the store, his evenings at the saloon, anywhere that wasn't home. Her mother became a warden, measuring, timing, controlling every aspect of Clara's existence. She meant well. Clara could see that, could see the love twisted into something unrecognizable by fear and desperation. But meaning well didn't make it hurt less. Month 4 brought the first collapse. Clara was walking her required 3 hours, circling the edge of town in the brutal August heat when the world tilted sideways. She reached for something to steady herself, found only air, and went down hard on the packed dirt road. She lay there, cheek pressed against earth that smelled like dust and horse manure, and thought, "This is how I die." Not in childbirth, like the stories warned, not in some tragic accident, just here, on the side of a road, because she wasn't good enough as she was, because her body was unacceptable, because love came with conditions she couldn't meet. Footsteps approached. Heavy boots. A man's voice, rough with concern. "Miss? Miss, can you hear me?" Strong hands lifted her, gentle despite their calloused roughness. Clara's vision swam, black spots dancing across her field of view. She caught glimpses, sun-darkened skin, a worn hat, eyes the color of river stones. "I've got you," the voice said. "Just breathe. That's it. Nice and slow." Water touched her lips, cool and clean, the most beautiful thing she'd ever tasted. She drank greedily, her body screaming for it. "Easy now, not too fast or you'll be sick." The world slowly came back into focus. Clara found herself sitting in the shade of a scrub oak, supported by a man she'd never seen before. He was maybe 30, with the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors. Rancher, probably, based on the rope burns on his hands and the dust on his clothes. "What happened?" Her voice came out as a croak. "You fainted, went down like a cut tree." He studied her face with an expression she couldn't read. "When's the last time you ate?" Clara tried to remember. Yesterday? The day before? "This morning," she lied. His jaw tightened. He didn't believe her. "You need a doctor." "No." The word came out too sharp. "No doctors. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're half dead." "I'm getting married." The words felt absurd, said out loud. "I'm preparing for my wedding." Something shifted in the man's expression. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. "You're Clara Whitmore." It wasn't a question. Everyone in Red Hollow knew her name now, knew her story, knew exactly what she was doing and why. "Yeah," she said, defeated. "That's me." The before picture. He stood, offering his hand. "Caleb Rourke. I supply cattle to the Hale Ranch." Of course he did. Of course even this stranger was somehow connected to the family that owned her future. Clara ignored his hand, struggling to her feet on her own. Her legs shook, threatening to give out again, but she locked her knees and stayed upright through sheer stubborn will. "Thank you for the water," she said formally. "I should get back to my walk." "You should get back to bed, or a meal, or anywhere that isn't this road in this heat. I have requirements to meet." Requirements? Caleb said the word like it tasted bad. "Is that what we're calling slow suicide now?" Clara's temper flared, a spark of her old self, buried but not quite dead. "It's none of your business." "You're right. It's not." He studied her for a long moment, something sad in his riverstone eyes. "But for what it's worth, I think you're worth more than whatever they're paying." He walked away before she could respond, climbing onto a horse she hadn't noticed, riding off toward the Hale estate. Clara stood alone under the scrub oak, his words echoing in her head. Worth more than whatever they're paying. When was the last time someone had assigned her worth based on anything other than her appearance? She couldn't remember. That night, Clara's mother found her crying in the kitchen, surrounded by her baking supplies. Flour, sugar, butter, all forbidden, all out of reach. "Put those away," Margaret said sharply. "You know you can't. I just want to bake." Clara's voice broke. "I just want to make something beautiful, something that matters. Please, Mama. Please let me have this one thing." Her mother's face softened for just a moment. Then the hardness returned, the armor she'd built against her own guilt. "Put them away, Clara. You're so close now. Don't ruin everything over a moment of weakness." Clara looked at the flower in her hands, fine and white, smelling like possibility, like joy. Like everything she used to be before they decided she needed to be less. She put it away. That night, she took an extra dose of the arsenic tonic, just to feel something other than hunger, just to sleep without dreaming of bread. Month 5 arrived with a letter from Victor. He would be visiting in 2 weeks to assess her progress. His mother would accompany him. They expected to see significant improvement. Clara read the letter 3 times, looking for any hint of warmth, any suggestion that he saw her as a person rather than a project. She found none. Her mother launched into a frenzy of preparation. New restrictions, longer walks, double doses of the tonic despite Clara's increasing symptoms. Tremors, nosebleeds, periods of confusion where minutes disappeared and she'd find herself somewhere with no memory of walking there. "Just 2 more weeks," Margaret said, brushing Clara's thinning hair. "Then he'll see how hard you've worked, how dedicated you are. He'll have to accept you." Clara stared at her reflection. She'd lost 43 pounds. Her body was transforming exactly as they'd demanded. She was becoming acceptable. She was also becoming invisible. Piece by piece, she was disappearing, and everyone was so proud of the progress. The day before Victor's visit, Clara collapsed again. This time, there was no stranger to catch her. She went down in her own backyard, alone, her mother inside preparing the house for inspection. She lay there in the dirt, staring up at the cloudless sky, and felt something inside her finally break. Not her body, though that was failing too. Her spirit. The part of her that had kept fighting, kept hoping that somehow this would be worth it. That love and security waited on the other side of suffering. But there was no other side. There was only more suffering, dressed up in wedding lace and false promises. Clara closed her eyes and let the darkness take her, almost grateful for the silence it brought. When she woke, she was in her bed. The doctor was there. Her mother had finally called him, propriety be damned. He examined her with professional detachment, took her pulse, looked at her pupils. "Starvation and poisoning," he said bluntly. "Another week of this treatment and you'll be dead." Her mother went white. But Mrs. Hale said, "I don't care what Mrs. Hale said. I care about keeping this girl alive." He snapped his medical bag shut. "Feed her, immediately. Real food, not rabbit portions. And destroy whatever tonic you've been giving her." "But the wedding There won't be a wedding if there's a corpse instead of a bride." He looked at Clara, something like pity in his eyes. "Young woman, you have a choice. Keep doing what you're doing and die before your wedding day. Or stop, recover, and face whatever consequences come." He left without waiting for a response. Clara's mother sat beside the bed, hands twisted in her lap. For the first time in months, she looked truly afraid. "What do we do?" Margaret whispered. Clara stared at the ceiling, at the water stains that looked like countries she'd never visit, adventures she'd never have. "We keep going," she said finally. "We've come too far to stop now." Her mother's relief was palpable, disgusting. She squeezed Clara's hand. "That's my brave girl. Just 1 more month, then it's all over." Yes, Clara thought, one way or another it would be over soon. She just wasn't sure she'd survive to see which ending she'd earned. Victor arrived on a Tuesday, 2 hours earlier than expected. Clara was in the backyard when the carriage pulled up, leaning against the fence post because standing without support had become difficult. She'd managed to eat some broth that morning, her mother's compromise with the doctor's orders, but it sat in her stomach like lead. The sound of expensive wheels on gravel made her turn. Through the gaps in the fence, she watched Victor descend from the carriage, his mother following in a sweep of emerald silk. They moved toward the front door with the confidence of people who'd never been told to wait for anything. Clara's hands started shaking. She pressed them flat against her dress, trying to still them through force of will. Her mother appeared at the back door, face flushed. "They're here! Come inside, quickly!" The parlor had been scrubbed until it gleamed. Fresh flowers sat on the mantel, an extravagance they couldn't afford. The good china was laid out, though Clara knew there was barely enough tea to fill the pot. Victor stood by the window, examining the room with the same detached interest he'd shown her 5 months ago. His mother had claimed the best chair, arranging herself like a queen on a throne. "Miss Whitmore." Victor's eyes found her, and Clara watched something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or disappointment? She couldn't tell which. "You've made progress." It wasn't a compliment, just an observation, clinical and cold. Mrs. Hale gestured for Clara to approach. "Turn around, girl. Slowly." Clara obeyed, her body moving through the familiar humiliation. She heard the rustle of fabric as Mrs. Hale consulted some paper, probably her lists, her measurements, her documentation of Clara's transformation. She's lost the weight, Mrs. Hale said, but the presentation is lacking. Her posture is poor, and what's wrong with her skin? The treatments have caused some minor side effects, Margaret said quickly. Nothing permanent. The doctor assures us, what treatments? Victor's voice sharpened. Silence filled the room like water rising. Mrs. Hale recommended a tonic, Clara heard herself say. Her voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Arsenic-based, for appetite suppression. Victor's head turned toward his mother. You gave her arsenic? In controlled doses, Mrs. Hale said, though her tone had gone defensive. It's perfectly safe. Many women of quality use it. Many women of quality die from it. Victor crossed the room in 3 strides, taking Clara's chin in his hand and tilting her face toward the light. His touch was impersonal, examining. Look at her. She looks consumptive. She looks thin, his mother countered, which was the requirement. I said presentable. This is... He dropped Clara's chin, stepping back. How much weight has she lost? 47 pounds, Margaret said, pride creeping into her voice. In 5 months. That's nearly 10 pounds a month. That's not healthy weight loss, that's wasting. Victor turned to his mother. You did this. I did what you asked, Mrs. Hale's voice went cold. You said she was unacceptable. I made her acceptable. I said she needed to lose weight, not half kill herself doing it. Clara watched them argue about her body like she wasn't standing right there, like she was a piece of furniture they were discussing refurbishing. The detachment she'd felt earlier was cracking, something hot and sharp pushing through. Perhaps, she said, her voice cutting through their debate, you could discuss my imminent death with me present instead of around me. Both Hales turned to stare at her. Her mother made a small, horrified sound. Victor's eyebrow lifted. You have opinions now. I have consciousness, which, given the arsenic consumption, might not last much longer. Clara met his gaze, surprised by her own boldness. Maybe it was the delirium. Maybe it was 5 months of swallowed rage finally finding its way out. So, yes, I have opinions, though I understand they're not part of the arrangement. Something that might have been amusement crossed Victor's face. You've developed a spine along with the weight loss. Funny what starvation does to a person's tolerance for nonsense. Clara! Her mother's voice cracked like a whip. Apologize. Immediately. But Victor held up his hand up. No, let her speak. This is more interesting than the simpering I expected. He leaned against the mantel, arms crossed. Go on then. Tell me what you really think. It was a trap. Clara knew it was a trap. But she was so tired of performing, of pretending, of swallowing every honest word that tried to leave her mouth. I think this entire arrangement is barbaric, she said. I think you're a coward who couldn't tell his own mother no. I think your family's money has made you all forget that people aren't livestock to be evaluated and purchased. And I think if I do marry you, I'll spend the rest of my life being reminded that I was never quite good enough to deserve it. The silence that followed was absolute. Her mother had gone white. Her father, who'd been lurking in the doorway, looked like he might have a heart attack. Mrs. Hale's face was a thundercloud. Victor just smiled. Well, he said softly, at least you're honest. He pushed off from the mantel, adjusting his cuffs. Mother, I believe we're done here. Victor, we're done. He moved toward the door, pausing to look back at Clara. For what it's worth, I agree with you. This whole thing is barbaric, but that's how the world works. Beauty and acceptability open doors. Everything else is just noise. He tipped his hat. Good luck, Miss Whitmore. I suspect you'll need it. He left. His mother followed, throwing one last venomous glare at Clara before sweeping out in a rustle of silk and fury. The door closed. Clara stood in the center of the parlor, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Her father found his voice first. What have you done? I told the truth. You destroyed us. Thomas's face went red, then purple. 5 months of work, 5 months of sacrifice, and you threw it away because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. He was going to reject me anyway, Clara said quietly. You saw his face. I'm not what he wanted. I never was. You don't know that. I do know that. Because I'm not stupid, Papa. I'm just desperate. There's a difference. Her mother sank into a chair, hands covering her face. The sound she made might have been crying or laughing or both. Clara's father stared at her like she was a stranger. Get out. What? Get out of my sight. Go to your room. I can't look at you right now. Clara went. Her legs barely carried her up the stairs, down the hallway, into the small room that had been hers since childhood. She closed the door and leaned against it, waiting for the tears to come. They didn't. She'd cried herself dry weeks ago. She lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and waited for whatever came next. Downstairs, she heard her parents arguing, her father's voice, loud and sharp, her mother's, defensive and cracking. The sound of something breaking, a plate maybe, or a cup, the sound of a family falling apart. Clara closed her eyes and felt nothing at all. The next morning, she woke to find her mother sitting at the foot of her bed. Victor sent a letter, Margaret said. Her voice was flat, emptied of emotion. He's withdrawing his offer, officially. He said you were right, that you'd never be acceptable, that the family would be embarrassed by your presence. Clara sat up slowly. What does that mean for us? It means we're finished. The bank will foreclose by the end of the month. Your father will likely face debtor's court. Her mother's hands twisted in her lap. I'll have to find work, somewhere, anywhere that will take a woman my age. I'm sorry. Are you? Margaret's head lifted, and Clara saw something cold and hard in her eyes. Because from where I'm sitting, you chose pride over family. You chose your own comfort over our survival. I chose not to die for a man who despised me. We all die eventually. At least you could have died comfortable. The words hung between them like smoke. Clara looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw the truth. Margaret would have let her daughter waste away completely if it meant security, would have fed her poison with a smile, measured her shrinking body with pride, and called it love the entire time. Get out, Clara said quietly. This is my house. Get out! The scream tore from somewhere deep inside her, 5 months of swallowed words finally erupting. Get out, and don't come back until you remember that I'm your daughter, not your commodity. Margaret stood, her face a mask of hurt and anger. You'll regret this. I already regret everything. One more thing won't make a difference. Her mother left, closing the door with careful, controlled precision, the kind of control that was more frightening than any slam. Clara lay back down and stared at the ceiling until the light changed and changed again, marking the passage of hours she couldn't feel. She needed to do something, make a plan, figure out how to survive what was coming. But her body was so heavy, her mind so slow. The arsenic and starvation had carved hollows into her, and she couldn't remember how to fill them. A knock at the door pulled her from the fog. Clara? Her father's voice, rough and uncertain. There's someone here to see you. Tell them to go away. It's Caleb Rourke, the rancher who found you on the road. Clara frowned. What could he possibly want? Send him away. He says it's about business, something to do with your bakery. Her bakery. The cold ovens, the abandoned flour, the joy she'd locked away. Clara had almost forgotten it existed. I'll be down in a minute. She dragged herself upright, catching sight of her reflection in the mirror above her dresser. She looked like a ghost. Pale skin stretched over sharp bones, hair thin and lifeless, eyes sunken into dark hollows. This was what acceptable looked like, apparently. She made her way downstairs, gripping the railing for support. Her father had put Caleb in the kitchen. The parlor was still being cleaned after the Hales' visit. Caleb stood by the window, hat in his hands, looking distinctly uncomfortable. When he saw Clara, something flickered across his face. Shock, maybe, at how much worse she looked since their last meeting. Miss Whitmore, he said carefully, thank you for seeing me. My father said you have business to discuss. I do. He glanced at Thomas, who was hovering in the doorway. If we could speak privately. Thomas looked like he wanted to refuse, but he was a businessman, even a failing one, and business meant potential money. He nodded curtly and left, though Clara could hear him pacing in the next room. Caleb waited until the footsteps faded before speaking. I heard what happened, with Victor Hale. News travels fast. It's a small town. People talk. He set his hat on the table. I also heard your family's facing foreclosure. Clara's jaw tightened. If you came here to gloat, I came here with a proposition. He pulled a paper from his pocket, unfolding it carefully. I supply beef to 6 different towns in the territory. But what they really want, what they ask me for every single trip, is bread. Good bread. The kind that doesn't taste like sawdust and sadness. And you think I can make that? I know you can. I had your honey wheat once, about a year back. Best bread I've ever eaten. He slid the paper across the table. I'm proposing a partnership. You bake, I deliver. We split the profit 60-40. Clara stared at the numbers he'd written down. They were good numbers. Better than good. If even half his projections were accurate, she could make enough to help her family. Maybe not save them completely, but help. Why me? She asked. You could find a dozen bakers who'd jump at this. Because you're good, and because, he hesitated, because I think you deserve a chance to build something that's yours, something nobody can take away, or judge, or measure. Clara looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He had an honest face, weathered but kind, the kind of face that didn't hide things well. What do you get out of this? She asked. Besides bread, a reliable supplier, and maybe, he met her eyes, maybe the satisfaction of helping someone who got a raw deal get back on their feet. It was too good, too convenient. Claire had learned the hard way that nothing came without strings attached. What's the catch? No catch, just business. He picked up his hat. Think about it. You've got until the end of the week. After that, I'll need to find someone else. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, what you did yesterday took guts. Most people don't stand up to the Hales. Most people have something to lose. You had everything to lose. You did it anyway. Something that might have been respect crossed his face. That means something. He left before she could respond. Claire sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the numbers on the paper. 60-40 split, delivery to 6 towns. Weekly orders starting small, scaling up based on demand. It was a lifeline. It was also charity, dressed up in business language. And Claire had spent 5 months being paraded and pitied and discussed like public property. The thought of accepting more pity, even well-intentioned pity, made her stomach turn. But pride didn't pay debts. Pride didn't keep roofs overhead or food on tables. Her father appeared in the doorway. What did he want? To offer me work. A baking partnership. Thomas's expression shifted through several emotions before landing on suspicion. Why would he do that? He says he needs a supplier. And you believe him? Clara looked at the paper again. I don't know, but it's the only offer we've got. Her father was quiet for a long moment, then, take it. Whatever the terms, take it. We need the money. It might not be enough to save the store. Then it'll be enough to delay the inevitable, which is all we can hope for now. He turned to leave, then stopped. I'm sorry. Clara looked up. For what? For all of it. For putting you through that. For, his voice cracked, for forgetting you were my daughter instead of a solution to a problem. It was the closest thing to an apology she was going to get. Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her father left her alone with the numbers and the decision. She sat there until the light faded, until her mother called her for the meager dinner they could still afford. She sat there thinking about acceptable and unacceptable, about worth and weight, about all the ways people measured value. Then she stood up, her legs shaking but holding, and went to find her baking supplies. If she was going to do this, she was going to do it right. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn and went to the kitchen. Her mother found her there 3 hours later, surrounded by flour and the smell of baking bread. What are you doing? Margaret asked. Working. Clara pulled a loaf from the oven, the crust golden and perfect. Caleb Rourke offered me a business partnership. I'm taking it. Her mother stared at the bread like it was a snake. You can't go back to baking. You'll gain all the weight back. Good. Clara. I almost died, Mama. For what? For a man who never wanted me anyway? For a family who values money more than my life? Clara set the loaf down, meeting her mother's eyes. I'm done shrinking. I'm done apologizing for existing. If that means I'm unacceptable, then I guess I'm unacceptable. Margaret's face went through a series of transformations: anger, fear, and finally, something that might have been understanding, or resignation. Clara couldn't tell which. You'll ruin everything, her mother said quietly. Everything's already ruined. At least this way I get to choose how I fall apart. She turned back to her baking, dismissing her mother without another word. After a moment, she heard footsteps retreating, the sound of a door closing. Clara was alone with her bread and her decision. She baked 6 more loaves that morning. By afternoon, she'd made 3 dozen rolls and 2 pies. Her body ached. 5 months of starvation had stolen her stamina, but it was a good ache. The ache of work, of purpose, of creating something that mattered. When Caleb arrived the next day to pick up his delivery, he found her in the kitchen, covered in flour, surrounded by the fruits of 2 days' labor. He looked at the bread, then at her, and smiled. Not pity, not calculation, just genuine pleasure. You're really doing this, he said. I'm really doing this. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. 60-40 split, weekly deliveries, and I want it in writing. Smart. He pulled out a contract he'd already prepared, sliding it across the table. I had my lawyer draw this up. Everything we discussed, official and legal. Clara read it carefully, looking for traps, for hidden clauses, for any way this could turn into another cage. She found nothing but straightforward business terms. Why are you helping me? She asked again. Caleb was quiet for a moment. My sister, he said finally. She went through something similar. Different circumstances, same result. She didn't survive it. He met Clara's eyes. When I found you on that road, I saw her. And I thought, maybe this time I could actually do something. It was the most honest answer she'd gotten from anyone in months. Clara signed the contract. They shook hands, his grip firm and warm, calloused from honest work. Partners, he said. Partners, Clara agreed. He loaded the bread into his wagon, handling each loaf like it was valuable. Before he left, he turned back. You should eat some of what you make. You're still too thin. I know. I'm working on it. Good. He climbed onto the wagon. I'll be back next week. Same time. Clara watched him drive away, the wagon loaded with her work, her skill, her reclaimed joy. For the first time in 5 months, she felt something other than numbness or despair. She felt possibility. That night, she ate 2 slices of bread with butter. Her stomach cramped, too long without real food, but she forced herself to finish both slices. Then she went to her room and threw the arsenic tonic out the window, watching the bottle shatter on the ground below. Her mother found the broken glass the next morning and said nothing. The silence between them was different now. Not hostile exactly, but not comfortable either. They were strangers sharing a house, connected by blood but divided by choices neither could take back. Clara's father threw himself into the store, trying to salvage what he could before the bank came calling. He didn't speak to Clara much, but she'd catch him watching her sometimes, his expression unreadable. The town, of course, had opinions. The story of Clara's outburst spread like wildfire. Some people were scandalized. How dare she speak to Victor Hale that way? Others were secretly pleased. The Hales needed taking down a peg. Most just added it to their collection of gossip about the Whitmore family's spectacular fall from grace. Clara ignored them all. She baked, she rested, she slowly started eating regular meals again. Her body responded with confusion at first, her stomach rejecting food it had been denied for months. But gradually, things stabilized. She gained back 5 pounds in the first 2 weeks. Her mother noticed but said nothing. Her father noticed and looked almost relieved. Caleb came every week, like clockwork. He'd load up the bread, count out Clara's share of the profits, and sometimes stay for coffee. They didn't talk much. He wasn't a chatty man, but his presence was comfortable, steady. He never mentioned her weight, never commented on her appearance. He talked about the weather, the ranching business, the towns he delivered to. He treated her like a person, not a project. It was startlingly rare. One afternoon, about 6 weeks into their partnership, Clara asked him about the towns he served. 6 in total, he he said, counting on his fingers. Red Hollow, obviously. Then Copper Creek, Pine Ridge, Silverton, Blackwater, and Morgan's Crossing, about 100-mile circuit, all told. That's a lot of traveling. I like the road. Gives me time to think. He took a sip of coffee. Besides, each town has its own character. Copper Creek's got the best saloon. Pine Ridge has that view of the mountains. Silverton's full of miners who'll pay extra for anything that reminds them of home. And Morgan's Crossing? Quiet place. Mostly farmers. They make the best apple butter I've ever tasted. He set down his cup. You'd like it there. Nobody knows your story. Nobody cares about the Hales or Red Hollow politics. You're just the person who makes the bread. Clara felt something catch in her chest. That sounds nice. It is. Caleb looked at her with those riverstone eyes. If you ever want to leave this place, there's worse options than Morgan's Crossing. I can't leave. My family, your family will manage. They managed before you, they'll manage after. His voice was gentle but firm. I'm just saying, you've got options, more than you think. He left soon after, taking the week's delivery with him. Clara stood in the empty kitchen, thinking about Morgan's Crossing, about being somewhere nobody knew her as the girl who failed to become acceptable, somewhere she could just be Clara, Baker, person. It was a dangerous thought, the kind that took root and grew, but she wasn't ready to run. Not yet. She had debts to pay, both financial and emotional. She had parents who, despite everything, were still her parents. And she had bread to bake. So she stayed and she worked and she slowly started to feel like a person again instead of a measurement that never quite added up. The town watched, waiting for her next failure. But Clara had learned something in 5 months of suffering. Their opinions didn't actually matter. They judged her fat, then judged her thin, then judged her defiant. They'd never be satisfied, no matter what she did. So she stopped trying to satisfy them. She baked her bread. She took Caleb's money. She ate her meals and felt her strength returning in small, hard-won increments. And when people whispered as she passed, she held her head up and kept walking. 2 months into the partnership, Caleb arrived with news. Silverton wants to double their order, and Blackwater's asking if you can do pastries. Clara looked up from kneading dough. Pastries? Sweet things, cookies, pies, those little tarts you made once. The mine owner's daughter tried one at a church social. She won't stop talking about them. It meant more work, more hours in the kitchen, more supplies to buy. But it also meant more money, enough to make a real dent in her family's debts. I can do pastries, Clara said, but I'll need advance payment for the ingredients. Sugar's expensive. Caleb pulled out his wallet without hesitation. How much? She named a figure. He counted out the bills and handed them over, plus 20% extra. What's this for? Clara asked. Investment in future profits, and because I trust you. He smiled slightly. Besides, I've tasted your work. Those pastries are going to make us both rich. Clara looked at the money in her hands. More cash than she'd seen in months. More than that, it was trust, someone betting on her skill instead of her appearance. She folded the bills carefully. I won't let you down. I know. He left her to plan her first batch of pastries, and Clara felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope, maybe, or purpose, or just the simple satisfaction of being valued for what she could do instead of how she looked doing it. Whatever it was, it felt like breathing after months underwater. That evening, she gave half the advance money to her father. For the bills, she said. Thomas stared at the cash like it might disappear. Where did this come from? The bakery partnership. Caleb's expanding the orders. Clara, this is more than I make in a month at the store. He looked up at her, eyes wet. How did you? I'm good at what I do, when people actually let me do it. She turned to leave, then stopped. Papa, I'm not saving this family alone. You need to figure out the rest. I can help, but I can't fix everything. I know. His voice cracked. I know, and I'm going to try. I promise I'm going to try. It wasn't enough. It didn't erase 5 months of poison and starvation and watching her parents choose money over her life. But it was something. Clara went to bed that night with flour under her fingernails and aching muscles and a full stomach. She was still too thin, still recovering from months of abuse disguised as improvement, but she was alive, and she was building something that belonged to her. That had to count for something. 3 months into the partnership, Clara received an envelope with the Hale family seal. She stared at it for a full minute before opening it, her hand steadier than she expected. The letter inside was written in Victor's precise handwriting, each word chosen with careful deliberation. "Miss Whitmore," it began, formal and distant. "I write to inform you that my mother has reconsidered our previous arrangement. Given your recent business success and improved circumstances, she believes a union between our families would still be advantageous. The wedding date has been set for October 15th, as originally planned. I expect your cooperation in this matter." No apology. No acknowledgement of the months of suffering he'd put her through. Just an expectation that she'd fall in line like nothing had happened. Clara read it twice, then carried it to the kitchen stove and fed it to the flames. Her mother appeared in the doorway. "What was that?" "Nothing important." Clara turned back to the pastry dough she'd been working. "Just someone who thinks I'm still for sale." Margaret's face went tight. "That was from the Hales, wasn't it?" "Doesn't matter. It matters if they're offering another chance." "There is no other chance." Clara pressed the rolling pin down hard, flattening the dough with more force than necessary. "That door is closed, locked, burned down." "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest." Clara looked up, flour dusting her cheeks. "They had their chance. They threw it away. Now it's my turn to do the same." Her mother opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Something in Clara's expression must have convinced her that this particular battle was lost. "What am I supposed to tell people when they ask?" "Tell them the truth. Tell them I said no. Tell them whatever you want." Clara returned to her work. "I'm done living my life for an audience." Margaret left without another word, and Clara finished her pastries in blessed silence. That afternoon, Caleb arrived for his weekly pickup. He loaded the bread and pastries into his wagon with his usual efficiency, then handed Clara her share of the profits. The amount had grown steadily over the past months, enough that she'd managed to pay off a quarter of her family's debts. "You look troubled," he said, leaning against the wagon. "Something happened?" Clara hesitated. She'd kept their conversations strictly business, afraid to blur the lines between professional partnership and personal connection. But the letter had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. Victor Hale sent a proposal. Again. Caleb's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And I burned it. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. "Good. My mother disagrees. She thinks I'm being foolish, throwing away security out of pride. You're throwing away prison out of self-respect. There's a difference." Caleb pulled his hat off, running a hand through his hair. "Can I tell you something?" Clara nodded. "I deliver to the Hale Ranch twice a month. I've seen how Victor treats people he considers beneath him. His ranch hands, his servants, his horses." He met her eyes. "He's not cruel exactly, just cold. Like people are things to be managed instead of known. That's what I was to him. A thing to be managed, improved, made acceptable. You were always acceptable. He was just too blind to see it." Caleb put his hat back on. "The towns I deliver to, they don't care what you look like. They care that your bread is the best they've ever tasted, that your pastries sell out in an hour, that you deliver what you promise every single time. That's business. It's different." "Is it? Seems to me that's how all relationships should work. You value what someone brings, not what they look like bringing it." He climbed onto the wagon. "Just think about that before you let anyone convince you to settle for less." He left Clara standing in the yard, his words echoing in her head. 2 weeks later, Victor Hale showed up in person. Clara was in the kitchen, elbows deep in bread dough, when her father appeared in the doorway. His face had gone pale. "Victor Hale is here. He's asking to speak with you." Clara's hands stilled in the dough. "Tell him I'm busy." "Clara, please, just talk to him. Hear what he has to say." "I heard what he had to say 5 months ago. I'm not interested in a repeat performance." "Things are different now. You're different. Maybe he nothing." Clara pulled her hands from the dough, wiping them on her apron. "But fine, I'll talk to him. On my terms. In my kitchen." Her father looked like he wanted to argue, but Clara's expression stopped him. He disappeared, and a moment later Victor Hale walked into the kitchen. He looked the same, tall, well-dressed, handsome in that polished way that came from money and leisure. But Clara saw him differently now. Saw the coldness in his eyes, the entitled set of his shoulders, the way he looked around her kitchen like he was cataloging its deficiencies. "Miss Whitmore?" He removed his hat. "Thank you for seeing me. I'm working. You have 5 minutes." Clara turned back to her dough, kneading it with steady, practiced motions. Victor's eyebrow lifted. "I see you've gained some weight back." "I've gained my health back. There's a difference." "I meant no offense. You look, well." He cleared his throat. "I came to discuss my proposal." "The one I ignored? Or the one I burned?" "Both, I suppose." He moved closer, though not close enough to crowd her. "I may have been hasty in my initial assessment. Rash, even. I've reconsidered." "How generous of you." "I'm trying to apologize." Clara stopped kneading and looked at him directly. "Then apologize. Don't dance around it with 'I may have been hasty.' Say what you mean." Victor's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged. "I apologize for my previous behavior. It was ungentlemanly." "It was barbaric. Try again." "Excuse me?" "You don't get to poison someone for 5 months and call it ungentlemanly." Clara's voice stayed level, but her hands gripped the edge of the table. "You made me hate my own body. You made my parents torture me in the name of making me worthy. You stood by while I nearly died, and when I finally collapsed, you blamed me for not trying hard enough. I didn't know about the arsenic. You knew I was starving. You saw me wasting away. You just didn't care enough to stop it." Clara wiped her hands on her apron. "So no, I don't accept your apology, and I don't accept your proposal. Is that clear enough, or should I use smaller words?" Victor's face went red. "I came here offering you everything. Security, status, a future. And you're throwing it back in my face because of wounded pride?" "I'm throwing it back because I'd rather eat bread in poverty than cake in a cage." Clara picked up her dough, shaping it with firm, angry movements. "Your 5 minutes are up." "You're making a mistake." "Probably. I've made a lot of them. But at least this one is mine." She shaped the loaf and set it aside to rise. "Close the door on your way out." Victor stood there for a long moment, his expression cycling through anger, disbelief, and something that might have been genuine confusion, like he couldn't fathom why anyone would refuse what he was offering. Finally, he put his hat back on. "When you come to your senses, don't expect me to ask again." "I won't." He left, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. Clara's hands were shaking. She gripped the table, breathing deeply, trying to calm the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Her father appeared moments later. "What did you do?" "I said no." "Clara, that was our chance." "It was never a chance. It was a trap with wedding bells." She looked at him, really looked at him. "Papa, I love you, but I will not marry that man. Not for money, not for security, not for anything." "Then what are we supposed to do?" "We work. We save. We figure it out." Clara started cleaning up her workspace. "I'm making enough from the bakery to help. You're doing better at the store. Mama could take in sewing. We have options that don't involve selling me." Thomas sank into a chair, suddenly looking much older than his years. "I wanted better for you." "You wanted easier for you. There's a difference." The words were harsh, but not untrue. Her father didn't argue. He just sat there, staring at his hands, while Clara finished her baking. That evening, the whispers started. Clara Whitmore had rejected Victor Hale. Again. In her own kitchen, covered in flour, she'd told one of the wealthiest men in the territory to leave. The town couldn't decide if she was brave or insane. Mrs. Henderson from the millinery thought it was romantic, a woman standing up for herself. Mr. Blackwell from the saloon thought it was stupid. You don't refuse Hale money. The younger women watched Clara with a mixture of envy and horror, wondering if they'd have the courage to do the same. The Hale family, unsurprisingly, was less philosophical. Mrs. Hale arrived 3 days later, her carriage rolling up to the Whitmore house like a storm cloud. She swept inside without knocking, finding Clara in the kitchen as usual. "You foolish girl," Mrs. Hale said without preamble. Do you have any idea what you've done? Clara looked up from the pie she was assembling. I imagine I've bruised your son's ego. How will he ever recover? You've embarrassed this family twice. Mrs. Hale's voice could have cut glass. We don't forget embarrassment. Neither do I. Funny how that works. I could destroy you. Your father's debts could be called in immediately. Your family could be on the street by the end of the week. Clara set down her rolling pin. Then do it. Call in the debts. Take the house. Take everything. She met Mrs. Hale's eyes without flinching. But you won't get me. I'd rather sleep in a ditch than in your son's bed. Mrs. Hale's face went white, then red. You ungrateful. I'm not ungrateful. I'm done. Clara picked up her rolling pin again. You came here to threaten me, and I'm not interested. So unless you're planning to buy a pie, I think we're finished. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. Clara returned to her work. Close the door on your way out. There's a draft. Mrs. Hale left in a fury of silk and outrage, and Clara finished her pie with hands that only shook a little. Her mother found her an hour later, still in the kitchen, surrounded by a dozen finished pies. You shouldn't have antagonized her, Margaret said quietly. Probably not, but it felt good. Feeling good won't keep a roof over our heads. Neither will marrying a man who thinks I'm disposable. Clara started cleaning her workspace. Mama, I know you're scared. I'm scared too, but I'd rather face that fear standing on my own feet than on my knees begging Victor Hale to find me acceptable. Her mother was quiet for a long time. Then, when did you get so strong? When I realized being weak wasn't saving anyone, least of all me. Margaret left without another word, and Clara finished her cleaning in the gathering darkness. The next morning, Clara woke to find a note under her door. Caleb's handwriting, brief and to the point. Heard what happened. Good for you. Also, Morgan's Crossing wants a standing weekly order. Your share would be enough to cover your family's mortgage payment. Interested? Clara read the note 3 times, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Morgan's Crossing. The quiet town where nobody knew her story, where she'd just be the person who made the bread, and now it could be the town that kept her family housed. She found Caleb at his usual pickup time, leaning against his wagon in the morning sun. Morgan's Crossing, she said without preamble. Tell me more. He straightened, something that might have been hope crossing his face. It's a farming community, about 60 families. They've been buying your bread secondhand from Silverton, marking it up and reselling it. I told them I could get it to them direct, fresher, and cheaper. They jumped at it. What kind of quantities are we talking? 50 loaves a week to start, plus whatever pastries you can manage. They're offering 12 cents a loaf, 8 for resale, 4 for you. Clara did the math in her head. 4 cents times 50 loaves, plus pastries. Weekly. It was more than she made from all her other towns combined. When do they want to start? Next week, if you can manage it. I can manage it. Clara crossed her arms. But I'll need help. I can't bake that much volume alone and maintain quality. I know someone in Morgan's Crossing. Young woman, good hands, needs work. I could ask if she'd be willing to apprentice. Apprentice with me? I'm barely keeping my own head above water. You're the best baker in 6 towns, Clara. That's not barely anything. Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. Besides, having help means you could expand, take on more orders. Maybe even, he hesitated, maybe even what? Maybe even move there, to Morgan's Crossing, start over where nobody knows your past. The suggestion hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. I can't leave my family, Clara said, but her voice lacked conviction. Your family will be fine, better than fine with the money you'll be sending back. Caleb shifted his weight. I'm not saying you have to decide now, just think about it. There's a whole world outside Red Hollow. Might be nice to see some of it. He left her with the offer and the thought, both equally dangerous. That night, Clara lay in bed thinking about Morgan's Crossing, about fresh starts and clean slates, about being somewhere nobody had watched her waste away or judged her for gaining weight back. But she also thought about her parents, her father trying to rebuild what he'd lost, her mother slowly learning to see Clara as a person instead of a problem to solve. Leaving felt like abandoning them, but staying felt like drowning. She didn't sleep much that night. The next week brought the first order from Morgan's Crossing, and with it, a level of work Clara had never experienced. She baked from dawn until well past dark, her kitchen a constant flurry of flour and heat. Her mother helped, despite their complicated history. They worked in silence mostly, the rhythm of baking creating a kind of peace between them. On the third day, Margaret spoke. "You're good at this. I never realized how good." Clara looked up from the bread she was shaping. "Thanks. I should have said it earlier, before everything. I should have—" Her mother's voice cracked. "I should have protected you instead of trying to change you." It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't enough to erase 5 months of poison and pain. But it was something. "I know you were scared," Clara said quietly. "I understand that. But I needed you to be my mother, not my warden." "I know, and I failed you." Margaret wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I can't take it back, but I can try to do better going forward." Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They finished the day's baking in a different kind of silence, still heavy, but less suffocating. When Caleb arrived for pickup, he had someone with him, a young woman, maybe 19, with strong hands and nervous eyes. "This is Sarah," he said, "from Morgan's Crossing. She's interested in apprenticing, if the offer still stands." Clara looked at Sarah, seeing something familiar in her expression. Hunger, but not for food. For opportunity. For a chance to be something more than what her circumstances allowed. "Can you follow instructions?" Clara asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Can you wake up before dawn and work until dark?" "I've been doing it on my father's farm since I was 10. "And you want to learn baking? It's hot work, repetitive. Your hands will crack and your back will ache." Sarah met her eyes. "Still sounds better than plowing fields that barely grow anything." Clara smiled despite herself. "All right, we'll try it for a month, see how it goes." Sarah's face lit up like sunrise. They established a routine quickly. Sarah arrived each morning before dawn, watching Clara work with intense focus. She asked good questions, remembered instructions, and didn't complain when her hands blistered from kneading. Within 2 weeks, she was competent. Within a month, she was good, having helped changed everything. Clara could take on more orders, experiment with new recipes, even sleep occasionally. The money increased accordingly. She gave most of it to her father, keeping only what she needed for supplies and a small amount for herself. Thomas took it with gratitude and shame in equal measure, watching his daughter succeed at the thing he'd forced her to abandon. The bank stopped sending foreclosure notices. The creditors stopped circling. The Whitmore family wasn't thriving, but they weren't drowning either. And through it all, Clara kept baking. 2 months after Sarah started, Clara made her decision. She found her parents in the kitchen after dinner. "I'm moving to Morgan's Crossing." Her mother's face went pale. "What?" "The business has grown too much. I need to be closer to my largest customer base, and—" Clara took a breath. "And I need to start over somewhere that doesn't define me by my worst moments." "But your family—" "But we'll be fine. I'll send money every week. More than I'm giving you now, actually, since I won't have living expenses here." Clara had planned this speech, rehearsed it. "This isn't abandonment. It's just necessary." Her father was quiet for a long moment. Then, "When?" "End of the month. I've already found a place. Small building with living quarters above a shop space, perfect for a bakery." "Does Caleb know?" Her mother's voice was tight. "It was his idea, actually. He's been helping me arrange it." Something complicated crossed Margaret's face. "Is there something between you two? Beyond business?" Clara had asked herself the same question. She still didn't have a clear answer. "I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter?" "It matters if you're running away from one man and into the arms of another." "I'm not running into anyone's arms. I'm running toward my own life." Clara stood. "I'm 23 years old. I've spent the last year either trying to disappear or trying to survive. I'd like to try living for a change." Her parents couldn't argue with that. They didn't try. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of planning and packing. Clara sold most of her belongings. She didn't need much for the new place. Sarah helped her organize supplies, create inventory lists, plan the new bakery layout. Caleb handled the logistics, arranging transport, helping negotiate the lease. introducing Clara to key people in Morgan's Crossing. He was professional throughout, careful not to overstep, but Clara caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. 2 days before the move, Victor Hale made one last attempt. Clara was in the kitchen, packing her baking tools, when he walked in without knocking. "I heard you're leaving," he said. "News travels fast." "I came to make a final offer." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. "Marry me, and I'll clear your family's remaining debts. All of them, plus a generous settlement to ensure your parents' comfort." Clara looked at the envelope, at the money it represented. More than she'd make in years of baking. "How much?" she asked. Victor named a figure that made her breath catch. "That's a lot of money." "It's what you're worth. To me, to my family, to our future." Clara took the envelope, opened it, and looked at the bank draft inside. It was real, enough to change everything. She handed it back. "No." Clara, no. She met his eyes. "You don't get to buy me. Not 6 months ago, not today, not ever. I am not for sale. Everyone has a price. Mine is higher than you can afford, because it's not measured in money." Clara turned back to her packing. "I'm worth being loved without conditions, worth being valued for who I am, not what I look like or what I can offer, and you can't give me that. You never could." Victor stood there, the rejected envelope in his hand, looking genuinely confused. "You're choosing poverty over comfort, struggle over security. Why?" "Because comfort bought with self-hatred isn't comfort. It's just a prettier cage." Clara closed the box of tools. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a life to pack." He left without another word, and Clara allowed herself a moment of shaking hands and rapid heartbeat before returning to her work. Her mother found her an hour later, sitting on the floor surrounded by half-packed boxes. "That was the right choice," Margaret said quietly. Clara looked up, surprised. "You think so?" "I do. It took me too long to see it, but—" Her mother sat down beside her. "You're building something real, something that's yours, that's worth more than any amount of Hale money." Clara leaned against her mother's shoulder, and for the first time in months, Margaret's arm came around her without hesitation. They sat like that for a long time, surrounded by boxes and new beginnings, grieving what they'd lost and hoping for what might come. The day of the move arrived with clear skies and nervous energy. Caleb pulled up with a wagon at dawn, helping Clara load her belongings with practiced efficiency. Her parents stood on the porch, her father's face tight with suppressed emotion, her mother openly crying. "You'll write?" Margaret asked. "Every week," Clara promised. "And you'll come visit?" "When I can." Her father stepped forward, pulling Clara into a rough hug. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for all of it. I'm so sorry." "I know, Papa." Clara held him tight. "I know." She climbed onto the wagon beside Caleb, her few possessions loaded in the back. As they pulled away, she turned to watch Red Hollow disappear behind her, the town that had judged her, starved her, tried to remake her into something acceptable. She felt no sadness at leaving it behind. "Ready?" Caleb asked. Clara looked ahead, at the road stretching toward Morgan's Crossing, and everything unknown waiting there. "Yeah," she said, "I'm ready." The building Caleb had found stood at the end of Morgan's Crossing's main street, sandwiched between a dry goods store and a modest boarding house. 2 stories of weathered wood, windows that needed cleaning, and a door that hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Clara loved it immediately. "It needs work," Caleb said, helping her down from the wagon. "The oven's functional, but old. Floorboards are loose in places. And the upstairs apartment hasn't been lived in for about 2 years. "It's perfect," Clara said, meaning it. He smiled, that quiet expression she'd learned to recognize as genuine pleasure. "Thought you might say that. Come on, I'll show you around." The ground floor was larger than she'd expected, room enough for ovens, work tables, a small counter space for customers. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled stale, but Clara could see past that to what it could become. Upstairs, the apartment was cramped but clean enough. One room served as bedroom and sitting area, with a tiny kitchen space in the corner. A window overlooked the street, letting in morning light that turned the dust motes into floating gold. "It's not much," Caleb said, watching her face. "It's mine." That makes it everything. Clara set down the bag she'd been carrying. When can I start moving in? Right now, if you want. I'll help you unload. They spent the next 2 hours carrying boxes up the narrow stairs, arranging furniture, sweeping out the worst of the dust. Sarah arrived midway through, having ridden in from her family's farm, and threw herself into the work with cheerful efficiency. By noon, the apartment looked livable. By evening, the bakery space below had been scrubbed and organized, ready for the equipment Caleb would bring tomorrow. Clara stood in the doorway as the sun set, looking at her new kingdom of flower and possibility. "You did good," Caleb said, appearing beside her. "This place is going to thrive." "You sound certain." "I am. I've seen what you can do when people stop trying to make you smaller." He handed her a key, heavy iron, worn smooth by years of use. "Welcome to Morgan's Crossing, Clara Whitmore." She took the key, its weight solid and real in her palm. "Thank you for all of it. Finding this place, helping me start over, believing I could—" "You don't need to thank me. This was all you." He tipped his hat. "I'll be back tomorrow with the oven parts. Sarah knows where everything is if you need anything tonight." He left before Clara could figure out what else to say, his wagon rattling down the darkening street. Sarah appeared with a basket. "Mrs. Chen from the boarding house sent dinner. Said to welcome you proper." They ate together on the apartment floor, Clara too tired to bother with chairs. The food was simple, stew and bread, but it tasted like victory. "What's Morgan's Crossing like?" Clara asked. "Really like, I mean, not the sales pitch." Sarah considered while chewing. "Quiet, slower than Red Hollow probably. People mind their business mostly. We've got farmers, a few ranchers, the boarding house, general store, saloon. Doc Patterson comes through once a month. Reverend gives sermons every Sunday for those who want them. And they really don't care about appearances? Weight, I mean. Some folks care about everything, can't escape that entirely." Sarah set down her bowl. "But mostly, people here judge you by your work. You deliver good bread, you're the bread lady. You deliver bad bread, you're the bad bread lady. Simple as that." It sounded too good to be true, but Clara was learning to accept good things when they appeared, even if she didn't quite trust them yet. That night, alone in her new apartment, Clara wrote her first letter home. She kept it brief, descriptions of the building, the town, the kindness of strangers. She didn't mention the fear that still woke her at 3 a.m., or the way her hands shook sometimes when she caught her reflection, or how she still heard Victor's voice calling her unacceptable in quiet moments. Some things didn't need to be written down to be real. The bakery opened 4 days later, and Morgan's Crossing turned out in force. Clara had spent those 4 days in a frenzy of preparation. The oven, once Caleb had repaired it, worked better than the one in Red Hollow. She'd baked test batches, adjusted recipes for the new equipment, created a display of her best work. When she opened the doors at dawn, 20 people were already waiting. Mrs. Chen came first, buying 4 loaves and 24 rolls. "For the boarding house," she explained, "but also because it smells like heaven in here." A farmer named Dutch bought everything with cinnamon. A young mother with 3 children clinging to her skirts carefully counted out coins for a single loaf, then looked surprised when Clara slipped an extra roll into her bag. "For the little ones," Clara said quietly. The woman's eyes went wet. "Thank you, miss." "Truly." By noon, Clara had sold out of everything. By evening, she had a list of orders for the next day that made her head spin. Sarah arrived the next morning to find Clara already elbow-deep in dough. "You're going to work yourself to death," Sarah observed. "Probably, but what a way to go." Clara shaped another loaf with practiced efficiency. "Can you start on the sweet rolls? I've got 36 orders." They fell into a rhythm quickly. Sarah handled the sweeter items while Clara focused on bread. They worked in comfortable silence mostly, occasionally calling out measurements or questions. Around mid-morning, Caleb appeared with supplies Clara had ordered. He unloaded them without being asked, stacking flour sacks and sugar bins with careful precision. "Busy day?" he asked. "Sold out yesterday. Probably will today too." Clara wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of flour. "This town really loves bread. They love good bread. There's a difference." He leaned against the doorframe. "Speaking of which, Silverton's asking to double their order again, and Blackwater wants to know if you do wedding cakes." Clara laughed, the sound surprising her. When had she last laughed? Wedding cakes. I barely have time for regular cakes. Just thought I'd ask. His eyes crinkled at the corners. You could always say no. I could. But the money's good and weddings are… She trailed off, something complicated crossing her face. Are what? Supposed to be about love. Not transactions. Not making yourself acceptable enough to deserve one. Clara returned to her kneading with more force than necessary. Tell Blackwater yes. I'll do their wedding cake. Someone should get their happy ending. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You'll get yours too, when you're ready. He left before she could respond, and Clara spent the rest of the morning wondering what he'd meant by that. The weeks passed in a blur of flour and fire. Clara's reputation grew. The new baker in Morgan's Crossing made the best bread anyone had tasted. People started traveling from neighboring towns just to buy from her. The money was better than good. Clara sent half of it home, keeping the rest for supplies and slow improvements to the building. She fixed the crooked door, replaced broken windows, bought proper shelves for the shop. Her body changed too. With regular meals and hard physical work, she gained back the weight she'd lost and then some. Her arms grew strong from kneading, her legs sturdy from standing all day. Her skin cleared, her hair thickened, her reflection started looking like someone she recognized. She felt healthy, alive, present in her own skin in a way she hadn't since before Victor Hale first called her unacceptable. One evening, about 2 months into Morgan's Crossing, Clara was closing up shop when a familiar carriage rolled down the main street. Her stomach dropped. The Hale family crest gleamed on the door, impossible to miss. The carriage stopped in front of her bakery, and Victor Hale stepped out, looking as polished and perfect as always. Clara's hands clenched around the broom she'd been holding. He walked into the shop without knocking, looking around with that evaluating gaze she remembered too well. So this is where you've been hiding, he said. I'm not hiding. I'm working. Clara set down the broom. What do you want, Victor? I came to see if the rumors were true, that you'd actually left Red Hollow, started over. His eyes traveled over her, and Clara saw the moment he registered her body's changes. You've gained weight. I've gained health. Again, there's a difference. I didn't mean it as criticism, just observation. He picked up one of the few remaining rolls, examining it. May I? Clara shrugged. It's a public bakery. You can buy whatever you want. He took a bite, and something like genuine surprise crossed his face. This is excellent. I know. You could have done this in Red Hollow, made money, supported your family, all without… He gestured vaguely. Without marrying you. Yes, I could have, if my parents hadn't locked up my baking supplies and forced me to starve instead. Clara crossed her arms. Why are you here, Victor? Really? He set down the roll, brushing crumbs from his fingers. I came to apologize. Properly this time. I don't want your apology. Perhaps not, but you deserve it anyway. He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something that might have been genuine remorse. What my family did to you was wrong. What I allowed to happen was wrong. You could have died, and I would have been responsible. You were responsible, you just didn't care enough to stop it. You're right, I didn't. I saw you as a problem to solve, not a person to know. He pulled out a chair, sitting without invitation. Can I tell you something honest? Can I stop you? Probably not. A ghost of a smile. I didn't want to marry you. Any of it. My mother arranged the whole thing. She wanted your father's store location for expansion. The marriage was just the mechanism. Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. So all of it, the judgment, the torture, the months of hell, it was about real estate? Essentially, yes. Victor had the grace to look ashamed. I should have refused, should have told my mother to find another way. But I was weak, and you paid the price. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know it wasn't about you. You were never unacceptable. You were just convenient. He stood, adjusting his jacket. For whatever it's worth, I'm glad you survived. Glad you got out. And I hope you build something here that makes you happy. He walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. Oh, and Clara, you were right. About me being a coward. About my family's money making us forget people aren't property. About all of it. Does knowing that change anything? For you? No. For me? He considered. Maybe. I'd like to think so. He left, and Clara stood in her bakery trying to process what she'd just learned. All of it, the starvation, the poison, the self-hatred, had been about a piece of land. Not even about her. Never about her. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt a rage so pure and hot it threatened to burn her from the inside out. Sarah found her an hour later, sitting on the floor surrounded by unsold bread, crying angry tears. What happened? Sarah knelt beside her. I was never the problem, Clara said through her tears. All that suffering, and I was never actually the problem. Sarah pulled her into a hug, and Clara let herself break apart in the safety of her friend's arms. All the months of holding it together, of being strong, of pretending the scars weren't still raw, it all came pouring out in ugly, gasping sobs. When the tears finally stopped, Sarah helped her up and made tea in the small apartment kitchen. What are you going to do? Sarah asked. Nothing. There's nothing to do. Clara wrapped her hands around the warm cup. I can't change what happened. Can't get back the time I lost or the trust I broke with my own body. I can just keep going. That's not nothing. Keeping going when everything wants you to quit. That's everything. Clara managed a weak smile. When did you get so wise? I watch you every day. I'm learning from the best. They sat together in comfortable silence, drinking tea and watching night fall over Morgan's Crossing. The next morning, Clara woke with a strange sense of clarity. Victor's confession had hurt, but it had also freed something inside her. She'd spent so long believing the problem was her body, her worth, her fundamental acceptability as a human being, but the problem had never been her. It had been them, their greed, their cruelty, their willingness to destroy a person for profit. She couldn't change them, but she could choose how she moved forward. Clara threw herself into her work with renewed energy. She expanded her menu, experimented with new recipes, started teaching Sarah more advanced techniques. The bakery thrived, becoming the heart of Morgan's Crossing in ways she'd never imagined. Caleb continued his deliveries, but something had shifted between them. He lingered longer, found excuses to help with heavy lifting, brought her small gifts, a new rolling pin, a jar of expensive vanilla, a book of recipes from France. You don't have to keep doing this, Clara said one afternoon, accepting a beautifully bound cookbook. I know. I want to. He cleared his throat, suddenly awkward. Clara, Caleb Rourke, are you trying to court me? His ears went red. Would that be unwelcome? Clara considered. Caleb was kind, honest, steady. He'd never asked her to change, never judged her body, never treated her as anything less than an equal partner. He made her laugh, challenged her thinking, and looked at her like she was remarkable. It was terrifying. I don't know, she said honestly. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. For anything that feels like expectation. No expectations, just possibility. He met her eyes. I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I'm just asking if I can keep bringing you vanilla and making excuses to see you. The vanilla is appreciated. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Clara touched his arm briefly. Give me time. All the time you need. He tipped his hat and left, and Clara stood watching him go, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. 3 months into Morgan's Crossing, word reached Clara that Red Hollow was struggling. Her father's letters had mentioned difficulties. The store wasn't doing well. Her mother's sewing work had dried up. Old debts were resurfacing. But Clara had been sending money faithfully, assuming it was enough. Apparently it wasn't. The letter that arrived on a cold November morning was different, desperate. Her father's handwriting shaky, the words practically screaming panic between the lines. The Hale family had called in every debt owed to them in Red Hollow. Not just the Whitmores, but dozens of families. It was a purge, a punishment for the town's failure to properly discipline Clara into compliance. Victor's final revenge, apparently, was collective. Clara read the letter 3 times, rage building with each pass. She found Caleb at the livery preparing for his weekly circuit. I need to go back to Red Hollow, she said without preamble. He looked up, reading something in her expression. What happened? She handed him the letter, watched his face darken as he read. "This is because of you," he said quietly. "Because you refused him. I know, and now everyone's paying for it." Clara's hands clenched. "I have to fix this." "How? You can't pay off an entire town's debts." "No, but I can confront the person causing them." She met his eyes. "Take me to the Hale estate. Today." Clara, Today, Caleb, please." He studied her face, then nodded. "Give me 20 minutes to hitch the wagon." They rode to Red Hollow in tense silence. Clara's mind spun with arguments, with strategies, with all the ways this could go wrong. She didn't care. The Hales had taken enough from her. They didn't get to take her town too. The Hale estate looked the same as it had 8 months ago, imposing, perfect, designed to intimidate. Clara marched up to the door and knocked hard enough to hurt her knuckles. A servant answered, eyes widening at the sight of her. "Miss Whitmore? Tell Mrs. Hale I'm here. Tell her I'm not leaving until she speaks with me." The servant disappeared. Clara waited, Caleb standing silently behind her like a wall of steady support. Mrs. Hale appeared in the doorway, her expression cold. "You have audacity, I'll give you that." "You're destroying innocent people because I hurt your pride," Clara said. "Call off the debts." "Why would I do that?" "Because it's cruel. Because they did nothing wrong. Because punishing an entire town for one woman's refusal is the act of a petty tyrant, not a respectable family." Mrs. Hale's eyes flashed. "You think you can shame me into kindness?" "I think you care about your reputation more than you care about revenge. And this?" Clara gestured broadly. "This makes you look small, vindictive, weak. Watch your tongue. Or what? You'll call in more debts? Destroy more lives?" Clara stepped closer. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. You already took everything you could from me. There's nothing left to threaten." They stared at each other, two women who'd been locked in an undeclared war for months. Finally, Mrs. Hale spoke. "What do you want?" "Cancel the debts, all of them. Let Red Hollow breathe." "And in exchange?" "In exchange, I'll never speak of what your family did to me. The arsenic, the starvation, the cruelty, it all stays private." Clara's voice went hard. "But if you continue this campaign of destruction, I'll make sure every newspaper in the territory knows exactly how the Hale family treats women they consider beneath them." It was a bluff. Mostly. Clara had no connections to newspapers, no proof of her claims. But Mrs. Hale didn't know that. The older woman's jaw tightened. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me. I've survived your worst. I'm not afraid of your lawyers or your money or your social standing." Clara met her eyes without flinching. "Cancel the debts, or I burn your reputation to the ground." The silence stretched like wire, taut and dangerous. Then Mrs. Hale smiled, cold and sharp as a knife. "You've grown a spine. I almost respect it." "I don't want your respect. I want your word." "You'll have it. The debts will be forgiven by the end of the week." Mrs. Hale's smile didn't waver. "But understand this, Miss Whitmore. You've made an enemy today." "I made an enemy 8 months ago when you decided I was acceptable for torture. This just makes it official." Clara turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Mrs. Hale, if anything happens to my family, my bakery, or anyone I care about, anything suspicious, anything convenient, I'll know who's responsible. And that's when the newspapers get their story." She walked away without waiting for a response, Caleb falling into step beside her. They didn't speak until they were back in the wagon, Red Hollow disappearing behind them. "That was reckless," Caleb said finally. "Probably. Could have gone very wrong." "I know." "You were magnificent." Clara looked at him, surprised. He was smiling, proud, and a little awed. "You think so?" "I know so. You walked into the lion's den and came out with exactly what you wanted." He snapped the reins, urging the horses faster. "That's not bravery. That's mastery." Clara leaned back against the wagon seat, exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. "I hope it works." "It will. Women like Mrs. Hale understand one thing: power. You just showed her you have it." They rode back to Morgan's Crossing in comfortable silence, and Clara allowed herself to believe him. The letter arrived a week later, confirming that the Hale family had forgiven all outstanding debts in Red Hollow. No explanation, no apology. Just a brief notice in the town ledger. Claire's father's next letter was 3 pages of gratitude and shock. Her mother included a note. You saved us. After everything, you saved us. Clara folded the letters carefully and put them in a drawer. She'd saved them, yes, but more importantly, she'd saved herself first. That night, she baked a special batch of bread and brought it to Caleb's ranch. He found her on his porch, holding a basket and looking nervous. I thought about what you said, Clara told him, about possibility, about giving you time. And I think I'm ready to try. Not promises, not expectations, just possibility. She handed him the basket. I made your favorite, honey wheat. Caleb took the basket, setting it aside. Then he pulled her into a hug, warm and solid and safe. Possibility sounds perfect, he said into her hair. They stood like that for a long time. 2 people who'd found each other through circumstances neither had planned, holding on to something that felt remarkably like hope. The possibility between Clara and Caleb grew slowly, carefully, like bread rising in warm darkness. He came by the bakery most mornings, always with some excuse, a delivery question, a supply order, news from one of the towns. They'd talk over coffee, their conversations ranging from business to childhood memories to the small observations that made up daily life. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give, and somehow that made Clara want to give more. 3 weeks after her confrontation with Mrs. Hale, Caleb invited her to dinner at his ranch. Nothing fancy, he said quickly, seeing her hesitation. Just a meal. Sarah can mind the shop for an evening. Clara agreed, surprising herself. His ranch was modest but well kept. A sturdy house, clean barn, fences in good repair. Everything spoke of a man who took pride in his work without needing to show off. Caleb cooked, which surprised her. Beef stew with vegetables from his own garden, bread he'd bought from her bakery 2 days prior. You didn't have to use my bread, Clara said, amused. Why would I use anything else? It's the best. He ladled stew into bowls. Besides, I like supporting my business partner. Is that what we are? Business partners? Caleb set down the ladle, meeting her eyes. I hope we're more than that, but I'll settle for whatever you're comfortable with. They ate at a scarred wooden table that had clearly seen decades of use. The food was simple but good, the conversation easy. Clara found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't since before the Hale nightmare began. After dinner, they sat on his porch watching the sun set over the distant mountains. The silence was comfortable, broken only by the occasional sound of horses in the barn. Can I ask you something? Caleb said finally. You just did, he smiled. Can I ask you something personal? Depends on the question. Do you ever regret it? Saying no to Victor? Walking away from all that money and security? Clara thought about it honestly. Sometimes, when my back aches from standing all day, or when I'm worried about making rent, or when I'm so tired I can barely think, in those moments I wonder if I made the right choice. And then I remember what that security would have cost. My dignity, my health, my sense of self. And I know I chose right. She looked at him. I'd rather be poor and whole than rich and broken. You're not poor. You're building something real. I know, but it's hard work and it's scary, and some days I wonder if I'm strong enough to keep going. Caleb reached over and took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused from years of ranch work. You're the strongest person I know. You survived something that would have destroyed most people. And you didn't just survive, you rebuilt yourself into something better. I'm not better, I'm just different. Different is better, because now you're yours. He squeezed her hand gently. Nobody owns you. Nobody gets to tell you what you're worth. That's power, Clara. Real power. She looked at their joined hands, feeling something shift in her chest. Why are you so kind to me? Because you deserve kindness, and because... He hesitated. Because I care about you. More than I probably should, given our business arrangement. Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I just wanted you to know. He released her hand, standing. I should get you back before it's full dark. The ride back to Morgan's Crossing was quiet, but the silence felt different now. Charged with things unsaid, Possibilities considered. When Caleb dropped her at the bakery, Clara surprised them both by leaning over and kissing his cheek. "Thank you," she said. "For dinner, for honesty, for everything." His hand came up to touch where her lips had been. "Any time." Clara watched him drive away, then climbed the stairs to her apartment with a strange lightness in her chest. The next morning brought a visitor Clara hadn't expected, her mother. Margaret appeared at the bakery door just after dawn, looking tired and windswept from travel. Clara nearly dropped the bread she was holding. "Mama, what are you doing here?" "I came to see you." "To see how you're doing." Margaret looked around the bakery, taking in the clean workspace, the organized supplies, the evidence of Clara's success. "May I come in?" Clara gestured her inside, still too shocked to form coherent words. They stood awkwardly in the bakery, months of complicated history hanging between them like smoke. "The place looks good," Margaret said finally. "You've done well for yourself." "I'm getting by." "You're doing more than that. Your father showed me the money you've been sending. Clara, it's more than we ever made from the store." "It's just bread, Mama." It's not just bread, it's talent and hard work and determination." Margaret's voice cracked. "It's everything I tried to take from you." Clara set down the bread she'd been holding. "Why are you really here?" "To apologize. Properly." Margaret pulled out a chair, sitting without invitation. "I failed you. Not just with the Hales, but before that. I raised you to believe that your worth was tied to your appearance, that being acceptable meant being small. I taught you to apologize for existing. You were scared. I understand that. Don't make excuses for me. I don't deserve them." Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. "I let fear turn me cruel. I fed you poison and called it love. I watched you waste away and told myself it was for your own good." Clara felt tears pricking her eyes. "I needed you to be my mother. You chose to be my warden instead. I know, and I can't take that back. I can only tell you I'm sorry and that I'm trying to be better." Margaret looked up, her own eyes wet. "Your father and I are selling the store, moving to my sister's place in Pine Ridge, starting over." "What? Why?" "Because Red Hollow is poison for us. Every street corner reminds us of what we did to you. Every whisper, every sideways glance." Margaret wiped her eyes. "We need a fresh start, just like you did." Clara didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to forgive immediately, to pull her mother into a hug and declare everything fixed, but the scars were too fresh, the wounds too deep. "I'm glad you're starting over," she said carefully. "I hope it helps." "Will you write to us in Pine Ridge?" "Yes, I'll write." "And can you forgive me? Someday?" Clara thought about it honestly. "I don't know, maybe, but not today." Margaret nodded, accepting the answer with more grace than Clara expected. "That's fair, more than fair." She stood, smoothing her skirts. "I should go. I just wanted to see you, to say what needed saying." She moved toward the door, then turned back. "Clara, you look healthy, happy even. I'm glad." After her mother left, Clara stood alone in her bakery and cried. Not the angry tears from before, but something gentler. Grief, maybe, for the relationship they'd never have, or relief that the worst was finally spoken aloud. Sarah found her 20 minutes later, still red-eyed but functional. "You all right?" Sarah asked. "I will be." Clara wiped her face. "Come on, we've got orders to fill." The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Clara baked, Sarah helped, Caleb delivered, and stayed for coffee. The bakery thrived, Clara's reputation spreading to new towns. And slowly, carefully, Clara and Caleb's possibility deepened into something more solid. He started staying for dinner some nights, cooking in her tiny apartment kitchen while she cleaned up from the day's baking. They'd eat together, talking about everything and nothing, building the kind of easy intimacy that came from shared time and honest conversation. One evening, about 5 months into Morgan's Crossing, Caleb brought up marriage. Not a proposal, just the concept, discussed the way they discussed everything. Honest and straightforward. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked. "Getting married, I mean." Clara's hand stilled on the dish she was washing. "Sometimes." "Why?" Just curious. Given your history, I wondered if the idea still appealed. She thought about it. I think marriage could be good. With the right person, built on the right foundation. Respect, partnership, choice. She set down the dish. But I'm not ready yet. There's too much I'm still figuring out about myself. That's fair. Caleb dried the dish she'd handed him. For what it's worth, when you are ready, if you are ready, I'd like to be considered. Clara looked at him, the steady man who'd never asked her to be anything but herself. You'll be first on the list. He smiled, and they went back to dishes. The conversation settled for now. But 2 weeks later, everything changed. Clara's father appeared at the bakery in the middle of the afternoon, wild-eyed and panicked. Clara, thank heaven. You need to come home. Now. Papa, what's wrong? Is Mama... Your mother's fine. We're both fine. But there's been an accusation. Thomas's hand shook. The Hales are saying you stole from them. Family heirlooms, valuable jewelry. They've convinced the marshal you took them during your time at their estate. Clara's blood went cold. That's insane. I was never alone in their house. I never took anything. I know that. But they have witnesses, servants who'll swear they saw you with the items. And Mrs. Hale is demanding justice. This is revenge, for the debts, for making them back down. I know, but knowing it and proving it are different things. Thomas gripped her shoulders. Clara, they're coming to arrest you. The marshal sent word ahead as a courtesy to me. You have maybe 2 hours before they arrive. Then I'll explain. I'll tell them the truth. They won't believe you. The Hales own half the territory, including the judges. You'll be convicted before you even get a trial. His voice broke. Baby, you need to run. Now. Get as far from here as you can. I won't run. I didn't do anything wrong. That doesn't matter. This is about power, not truth. They'll lock you up, and there's nothing I can do to stop them. Clara pulled away from her father, her mind racing. He was right. Running made her look guilty, but staying meant prison. Or worse. Caleb appeared in the doorway, having heard the commotion. What's happening? Thomas explained quickly, his words tumbling over each other in panic. Caleb's face went hard. This is manufactured, all of it. Of course it is, but that doesn't change what's coming. Thomas looked at Clara desperately. Please, for once, listen to your father. Run. Where would I go? I've built a life here. I can't just abandon it. Better to abandon it than lose it to a prison cell. Her father's voice cracked. I've failed you enough. Let me save you this time. Clara looked around her bakery, the ovens she'd repaired, the tables she'd scrubbed, the business she'd built from nothing. Leaving meant losing it all, but staying meant losing her freedom. Caleb stepped forward. There's another option. They both turned to look at him. Marry me, he said, right now, before the marshal arrives. Clara's breath caught. What? Married women have different legal standing. Your husband would have to be present for questioning. Any property accusations would go through me first. It wouldn't stop them entirely, but it would slow them down. Give us time to build a defense. Caleb, that's insane. You can't tie yourself to me because of a legal technicality. It's not just a technicality. It's protection. It's partnership. He took her hands. Clara, I was going to ask you eventually anyway. This just moves up the timeline. This isn't how you deserve to get married. It should be romantic, special. It's special because it's you. I don't care about romance. I care about keeping you free. His grip tightened. Let me do this, please. Clara looked at her father, who was nodding frantically. Looked at Sarah, who'd appeared from the back room and was staring wide-eyed at the unfolding drama. There's a justice of the peace 2 streets over, Sarah said. Old Mr. Hendricks. He'd marry you quick if Caleb asks. Claire's heart hammered in her chest. This was madness. Marrying someone to escape false charges, making a life decision in minutes instead of months. But the alternative was prison, or running forever, or trusting the Hales' twisted version of justice. All right, she heard herself say. Let's do it. The next 30 minutes were a blur. Caleb and Thomas ran to fetch Mr. Hendricks, while Clara changed into her best dress with shaking hands. Sarah helped with her hair, pulling it back from her face with trembling fingers. This is crazy, Sarah muttered. This is absolutely crazy. I know. but also kind of perfect in a terrifying way? Clara laughed, the sound edging toward hysteria. That describes my entire life lately. Mr. Hendricks arrived, a kindly old man who asked no questions when Caleb explained the situation. He'd married enough people in his 70 years to know that urgency didn't always mean scandal. They stood in Clara's bakery, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and the evidence of her hard work. No flowers, no music, no guests beyond her father and Sarah as witnesses. Mr. Hendricks opened his book and began the ceremony. Clara barely heard the words. Her focus was on Caleb's face, steady and certain, his hands holding hers like anchors in a storm. Do you, Clara Elizabeth Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? This was real. This was happening. This would change everything. I do, Clara said, her voice surprisingly steady. And do you, Caleb James Rourke, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Caleb's eyes never left hers. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. It was done. Just like that, Clara Whitmore became Clara Rourke. Caleb kissed her, gentle and brief, mindful of their audience. But even that small contact sent something electric through Clara's body. We need to file the paperwork immediately, Thomas said, before the marshal arrives. Mr. Hendricks pulled out the marriage certificate, signing it with flourished precision. I'll file this within the hour. By the time any officials come looking, it'll be recorded and legal. Thank you, Clara said, finding her voice. Truly, thank you. The old man smiled. Congratulations, Mrs. Rourke. May your marriage be long and happy, whatever the circumstances of its beginning. He left, taking Thomas with him to ensure the filing happened quickly. Clara stood in her bakery. Her bakery, she reminded herself, still hers despite the new name, and looked at the man who was now her husband. That just happened, she said. That just happened, Caleb agreed. We're married. We are. I don't know whether to laugh or cry or panic. How about all three? He pulled her into a hug. We'll figure this out, together. Sarah cleared her throat. Not to interrupt, but you should probably not be here when the marshal arrives. Caleb's right that marriage changes your legal status, but it'll look better if you're at his ranch, established as part of his household. She was right. They needed to build the appearance of a legitimate marriage quickly. Clara packed a bag with shaking hands, clothes, toiletries, a few precious items. She looked around the apartment that had been her sanctuary for months. What about the bakery? She asked. I'll mind it, Sarah said. You taught me well. I can handle things until this blows over. And if it doesn't blow over? Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Sarah hugged her tightly. Go, be safe. Trust Caleb. The ride to Caleb's ranch was silent. Clara sat beside her new husband, her bag at her feet, her mind spinning with everything that had just happened. Married. She was married. Not to Victor Hale with his cold eyes and colder judgments, but to Caleb Rourke, who'd never asked her to be anything but herself. The ranch appeared in the distance, solid and real. Clara, Caleb said as they pulled into the yard. I meant what I said, about wanting to marry you eventually. This might be happening faster than either of us planned, but it's not just legal protection. I care about you. I want this to be real. I care about you too. But Caleb, we just met 6 months ago. We barely know each other. I know you better than most people know their spouses after years. I know you're strong and stubborn and talented. I know you'd rather starve than compromise your principles. I know you make the best bread in 6 territories, and you hate sleeping past dawn. He helped her down from the wagon. I know enough. The rest we can learn together. Claire looked up at him, this man who'd become her husband in a frantic ceremony performed to escape false charges. What if it doesn't work? What if we're making a terrible mistake? Then we'll unmake it. But Clara, I don't think we are. He touched her face gently. I think we just accelerated something that was always going to happen. Before she could respond, the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the property. 2 riders approached, the marshal and a deputy, their badges glinting in the afternoon sun. That was fast, Caleb muttered. He stepped in front of Clara protectively. Can I help you, gentlemen? The marshal dismounted, a weathered man named Brooks, who Clara recognized from her early days in Red Hollow. I'm looking for Clara Whitmore. We have questions about some missing property from the Hale estate. Mrs. Rourke, Caleb corrected. Clara is my wife, as of this afternoon. Brooke's eyebrows rose. Your wife? Married by Justice Hendricks, filed with the Territorial Registry. Caleb's voice was steady, giving nothing away. So if you have questions for my wife, you'll need to ask them in my presence. That's the law, Marshal. Brooks looked between them, clearly trying to determine if this was legitimate or a hastily arranged fraud. Convenient timing, he observed. We've been courting for months. Ask anyone in Morgan's Crossing. Caleb pulled Clara closer. Now, what's this about missing property? The Hale family is reporting several valuable items stolen. Jewelry, silver, family heirlooms. They claim Clara, Mrs. Rourke, took them during her time at their estate. That's a lie, Clara said, finding her voice. I was never alone in their house. I never touched anything that wasn't mine. Mrs. Hale has witnesses who say different. Mrs. Hale has servants who will say whatever she pays them to say. Clara stepped out from behind Caleb. This is retaliation, Marshal. I refused to marry her son, and this is her revenge. Brooks sighed. He looked tired, like this was the last thing he wanted to deal with. Mrs. Rourke, I have a warrant to search your residence and bring you in for questioning. Then search, Caleb said. But you'll do it with me present, and Clara stays right here. The marshal and deputy searched the ranch thoroughly. The house, the barn, even the storage sheds. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Brooks returned to where Clara and Caleb waited, looking frustrated. I'll need you both to come into Red Hollow for formal questioning. When? Caleb asked. Tomorrow, 10 in the morning. We'll be there. Caleb's arm tightened around Clara's waist. Anything else? Just don't leave the territory. This isn't over yet. The marshal and deputy rode away, leaving Clara and Caleb standing in the ranch yard as the sun set around them. What do we do now? Clara asked quietly. Now we build our case. Get witnesses who can testify to your character. Find proof that you were never alone in the Hale house. Show that this is exactly what you said. Revenge dressed up as justice. And if we can't prove it? Caleb turned her to face him. Then we fight it anyway. Together. That's what marriage means, right? Standing beside each other when everything goes to hell. Clara managed a weak smile. Not exactly the romantic definition. Romance is overrated. I'll take partnership over poetry any day. He led her toward the house. Come on, let's figure this out. They spent the evening planning their defense. Caleb wrote letters to people in Morgan's Crossing who could vouch for Clara's character. Clara made a detailed timeline of her time at the Hale estate, documenting every moment she could remember. Around midnight, exhaustion finally caught up with them. You should sleep, Caleb said, standing. You can take my bed. I'll sleep in the... Don't be ridiculous. It's a big enough bed. We're married. Clara's cheeks flushed. I mean, we don't have to, but we can share like adults. Caleb looked uncertain. Clara, I don't want you to feel pressured. I don't. I feel tired and scared and overwhelmed, but not pressured. She stood, moving toward the bedroom. Come on. We both need rest for tomorrow. They lay in the darkness, careful not to touch, the space between them electric with newness and uncertainty. Caleb? Clara said into the darkness. Yeah? Thank you. For today. For all of it. You don't need to thank me. I do. Because you didn't have to do this. You could have let me run or fight it alone. But you didn't. She rolled over to face him. Why? Really? She could just make out his profile in the moonlight streaming through the window. Because everyone else in your life asked you to make yourself smaller, to fit their expectations, their needs, their version of acceptable. His voice was quiet but firm. I wanted to be the one who said you were enough, exactly as you are. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I don't know if this marriage will work. Neither do I, but I think it's worth trying. He reached across the distance between them, finding her hand. Sleep, Clara. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. She held his hand in the darkness and let herself drift off, feeling safer than she had in months. The hearing the next morning was exactly as awful as Clara expected. Mrs. Hale sat in the front row, perfectly composed, righteousness radiating from every pore. She'd brought 3 servants who swore they'd seen Clara pocketing jewelry during her visits to the estate. Clara's lawyer, a young man named Patterson that Caleb had found in Morgan's Crossing, did his best to poke holes in their testimony. But they were well coached, their stories matching perfectly. Then Patterson called character witnesses. Sarah testified about Clara's honesty in business, her dedication to her work. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house talked about Clara's kindness to struggling families. Even Doc Patterson, who treated folks in Morgan's Crossing monthly, spoke about her generous donations to families who couldn't pay for medicine. But it was Caleb's testimony that changed everything. "Mr. Rourke," the prosecutor said, his tone dripping with skepticism, "isn't it true you married the defendant yesterday, just hours before she was to be arrested?" "I married my wife yesterday, yes." "Convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" "Not particularly. I've been planning to ask her for months. This just moved up my timeline." "And you expect us to believe this marriage is legitimate, not a legal maneuver to protect a thief?" Caleb stood, his voice carrying through the small courtroom. "I expect you to believe that I married a woman of extraordinary character who's being persecuted by a family that can't accept rejection. Clara Whitmore, Clara Rourke, never stole anything. This is a vendetta, pure and simple." "That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Mrs. Hale, would you like to tell the court why you're really here? About how you forced Clara to starve herself, how you fed her poison for months, how you tried to remake her into something acceptable, and when she refused, you decided to destroy her instead." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. Mrs. Hale stood, her face white with fury. "That's slander! I'll have you arrested for telling the truth?" "Go ahead. I have witnesses. I have the doctor who treated Clara for arsenic poisoning. I have letters documenting your abuse." Caleb pulled papers from his pocket. "You want to play games with the law? Let's play." The judge called a recess. During the break, Mrs. Hale's lawyer approached Patterson. "My client would like to settle this matter quietly." "Meaning?" Patterson asked. "Drop the charges, no admission of guilt on either side. Everyone walks away." Clara wanted to refuse, wanted to fight, to drag the Hale family's cruelty into the light for everyone to see. But Caleb squeezed her hand. "Take the win," he said quietly. "This isn't about justice. It's about freedom." He was right. Proving the Hales wrong wouldn't undo the damage they'd done. It would just drag things out, cost money they didn't have, risk outcomes they couldn't control. "Fine," Clara said. "I accept." The charges were dropped within the hour. The judge made it official. No guilt, no admission, case closed. Clara walked out of the courthouse a free woman, her husband beside her. Mrs. Hale stood on the courthouse steps, watching them leave. For a moment their eyes met. Clara saw the hatred there, the desire for revenge. But she also saw something else. Defeat. Because for all her money and power and social standing, Mrs. Hale hadn't won. Clara had survived, had thrived, had built a life beyond the Hale family's control. That was victory enough. The ride back to Morgan's Crossing was quiet at first. Then Clara started laughing, great gasping laughs that bordered on hysteria. "What's so funny?" Caleb asked, though he was smiling. "Everything. All of it. I got married to escape false charges. My husband threatened to expose my abusers in open court. And we won by technically not winning at all." She wiped tears from her eyes. "My life is absurd." "It's not absurd. It's just eventful." "That's a generous interpretation." "I'm a generous man." He pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her. "Clara, now that the immediate crisis is over, we should talk about us, about what this marriage means." "You mean whether it's real or just legal protection?" "Both, either. Whatever you want it to be." He took her hand. "I meant what I said yesterday. I want this to be real. But I understand if you need time or if you want to annul it once things settle." Clara kissed him. Not gentle or brief like their wedding kiss, but deep and desperate and real. When they broke apart, Caleb looked dazed. "What was that for?" "For being you. For standing beside me, for never asking me to be smaller." Clara cupped his face. I want this to be real too. I'm terrified and we barely know each other, and this is probably crazy, but I want to try. Yeah? Yeah. He kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. They made it back to Morgan's Crossing as the sun was setting. Sarah had kept the bakery running perfectly, orders filled and customers happy. How'd it go? She asked anxiously. Charges dropped. We're free. Clara hugged her friend tightly. Thank you. For everything. So you're staying married then? To Caleb? Clara looked at her new husband, who was unloading supplies from the wagon. Yeah, I think we are. Good. He's better than Victor Hale by a mile. That's a low bar. True, but Caleb clears it easily. That night, Clara and Caleb returned to the ranch as husband and wife, really and truly. Not fleeing from danger, not scrambling to build legal protection, just coming home together. They made dinner side by side in the small kitchen, ate at the scarred table, washed dishes while talking about plans for expanding the bakery. It felt normal, comfortable. Right. Later, lying in bed in the darkness, Caleb spoke quietly. I know this isn't how you imagined getting married. Nothing in my life has gone how I imagined. I've stopped having expectations. That's a little sad. Maybe. Or maybe it's freedom. No expectations means no disappointment. She rolled over to face him. But also no joy when things exceed what you hoped for. And this, us? Clara thought about it. This exceeds. Definitely exceeds. He pulled her close, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt completely safe. The months that followed were a slow settling into their new reality. Clara split her time between the ranch and the bakery, with Caleb helping at both. They learned each other's rhythms, habits, quirks. She learned he was grumpy before coffee. He learned she sang while baking, usually off-key. She learned he had nightmares about his sister, the one who hadn't survived her own battle with impossible expectations. He learned Clara still flinched sometimes when she caught her reflection, still heard Victor's voice calling her unacceptable. They were both broken in their own ways. But they fit together anyway, filling each other's gaps. 6 months into their marriage, Clara received a letter from her mother. Margaret and Thomas had settled in Pine Ridge, opened a small general store. They were happy, the letter said, or at least they were healing. Will you visit them? Caleb asked, reading over her shoulder. Maybe. Someday. When I'm ready. Clara folded the letter carefully. They're trying. That's more than I expected. You're allowed to forgive them, you know, or not. Whatever feels right. I know. She leaned against him. I'm still figuring out what feels right. Take your time. We've got plenty of it. A year after their hasty wedding, Caleb asked Clara if she wanted a real ceremony. Something with flowers and music and guests who weren't there out of legal necessity. Why? Clara asked. Because you deserve it. A wedding that's about celebration, not desperation. Clara thought about it. About standing in a church or garden, wearing white, speaking vows she'd already spoken once before. No, she said finally. I like our wedding just fine. It wasn't traditional, but it was honest. It was us choosing each other when everything was falling apart. That matters more than flowers. You're sure? I'm sure. She kissed him. But if you want to do something to celebrate, we could throw a party, invite the whole town, show off the fact that we're still married and actually happy about it. They did exactly that. A harvest celebration at the ranch with food and music and dancing. Half of Morgan's Crossing showed up, along with folks from the other towns Caleb supplied. Clara wore a blue dress she'd made herself, nothing fancy. Caleb wore his good shirt and looked uncomfortable in it. They danced in the barn while people clapped and cheered. Sarah caught the makeshift bouquet Clara tossed, a bunch of wildflowers tied with string, and blushed when the blacksmith's son asked her to dance. It was messy and imperfect and exactly right. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, Clara and Caleb sat on their porch watching the stars. Happy? He asked. Yeah, I really am. She leaned against his shoulder. That scares me sometimes. Why? Because I keep waiting for it to be taken away. For someone to decide I don't deserve this. Nobody gets to decide that except you. Caleb's arm came around her. And maybe me, since I'm part of the package. You think I deserve happiness? I think you've earned it. Through every moment of suffering, every choice to keep going, every time you chose yourself instead of what other people expected. He kissed the top of her head. If anyone deserves happiness, it's you. Clara let herself believe him. Let herself sink into the certainty that this was real, this was hers, this was allowed. 2 years after leaving Red Hollow, Clara opened a second bakery location in Silverton. 3 years after, she published a small cookbook of her recipes. 5 years after, she and Caleb welcomed a daughter they named Hope. Not because Clara believed in easy optimism, but because she'd learned that hope was something you built, not something that fell from the sky. She never became thin again, never fit the Hale family's definition of acceptable. Her body remained her own, strong and soft and marked by years of hard work, and she never apologized for it again. Some nights, when sleep wouldn't come, Clara would lie awake thinking about the girl she'd been. The one who believed her body made her unworthy. The one who'd swallowed poison because other people said she should. That girl felt like a stranger now. Someone Clara had known once, had grieved for, had finally let go. In her place was a woman who'd learned that worth wasn't something you earned through suffering. It was something you claimed through choice. Clara chose herself. Every single day, in ways big and small, she chose herself. And that, more than any wedding or business success or social acceptance, was the victory that mattered. On a morning 10 years after leaving Red Hollow, Clara stood in her original bakery in Morgan's Crossing, teaching her daughter to braid bread dough. Hope's hands were small and clumsy, the braid uneven and imperfect. "It's ugly," Hope said, frustrated. "It's learning," Clara corrected. "And learning is never ugly. It's just growing." Through the window, she could see Caleb's wagon pulling up, right on schedule. Sarah was minding the Silverton location today. The ovens were hot and ready. Another day of work stretched ahead. Clara looked around her bakery, her kingdom of flour and choice, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. She'd survived. More than that, she'd thrived. Not by becoming acceptable to people who'd never wanted to accept her, but by building a life so full and real that their opinions stopped mattering. Caleb walked in, kissing Clara's cheek and ruffling Hope's hair. "Ready for another day?" he asked. Clara looked at her family, her business, her life built from ashes and stubborn determination. "Yeah," she said, smiling, "I'm ready." And she was. For today, for tomorrow, for whatever came next. Because she'd learned the most important truth of all. She was enough, exactly as she was. And no one, ever again, would convince her otherwise.